Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Everything Co-op this new year. And we have Miss Courtney Berner on the line with her. She is the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. Good morning, Courtney, and Happy New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you.
How are you doing this day?
I am doing great. It's actually a pretty balmy winter day in Madison, so I actually got to bike into work this morning, so not something I do very often in January, but so feeling good.
So when you say balmy, that means you have no snow and the weather's fairly decent in Madison.
Balmy is actually this time of year. It was 32 degrees when I biked in. So, but yesterday I think it topped out at something like 15, so it felt pretty good.
Wow. Okay, I'll leave that to you.
It's all relative.
That's the weather's good for you up in Madison, Wisconsin. Got it. So you are the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives.
I sure am.
What is the Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives?
So the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives is a Madison-based center. We serve the entire state of Wisconsin and have actually programs sort of beyond Wisconsin. But we were founded in 1962, and we do research, outreach, and education on the cooperative business model. And then we also have a co-op development program where we help people start new cooperatives and help businesses convert to the cooperative model. So we have sort of a wide range of activities. We serve all types of co-ops, so worker co-ops, consumer co-ops, farmer co-ops, in every sector. So we have a pretty broad reach and try to really focus on the issues and the topics that tie co-ops together, that co-ops really share across those sectors.
So, Courtney, how did you get into this work?
So, I'm not originally from Wisconsin. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Oregon, went to college in Washington. But before moving to Madison, a little over 10 years ago, I was actually living in Washington, D.C., and working at sort of a globally focused environmental research organization. And I was deep in this place of thinking about big, intractable problems like overconsumption and climate change and biodiversity loss, and which quite honestly got pretty depressing after 4 years. And during my time at that research institution, sort of my lifelong interest in cooking and eating delicious food evolved into a deeper interest in agriculture and food systems. So I started thinking about my next steps career-wise, and I think I was craving a way to still engage in work that focused on sort of making things better for people on the planet, but in a more applied way. So fast forward a couple of years, I ended up actually at UW-Madison studying agroecology, which is basically a discipline focused on applying ecological concepts to the agricultural landscape. And I was interested in agricultural production, but also in local and regional food systems, sort of why they had eroded over the decades, and what it might look like to rebuild them. So I started my coursework here in 2009. And I somewhat randomly enrolled in a course on cooperatives my first semester of grad school. It was randomly. I don't even quite know. I just saw it. It looked interesting. It was actually at 8 a.m. at the top of Bascom Hill, so it was not the most convenient place to get to. But
you chose a class at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I did. I was a crazy, 30-year-old grad student. So yeah, I was. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I took the class. And, when I lived in D.C., I was a member of the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Co-op. I lived in a big group house that we referred to as a co-op, but it really wasn't until taking that course that I developed sort of a true understanding of the model and what made cooperatives different from other businesses or sort of membership organizations. So, I ended up really, after that class, really focusing my studies and my thinking about what, my next steps might be on cooperatives and how the cooperative model could be used in the context of rebuilding regional and local food systems. So I did my master's project on a cooperative called Fifth Season Cooperative, which is a multi-stakeholder cooperative cooperative in southwestern Wisconsin that was really, it still exists, but it was striving to connect local institutions like hospitals and schools and universities with local farmers and their product. And so I basically did a co-op development project for my master's project, which was convenient. And my plan was to always move back to the West Coast after grad school. I was thinking of Madison and the Midwest as sort of a stopping point from DC back to Oregon. But I was offered a job at the center here as a co-op development specialist, and I initially turned it down. Then I said that I would do it for a year, which in retrospect is a really crazy thing to tell a prospective employer, but I did. And that was in 2011, and I'm still here.
So you told your future boss, well, I'll be here for 1 year. I'll take this job for a year.
I know. I mean, what a arrogant thing to say too. I mean, it took me a year to even figure out what I was doing in the new job. So yeah, I fell in love with the work and really fell in love with the Upper Midwest and Madison. And that was in 2011.
Who was the center director when you got the job in 2011?
When I started as a co-op development specialist, so Brent Hewitt was our faculty director, and Ann Reynolds was our executive director, and she was really an incredible mentor to me, and still is. I still see her we live in the same neighborhood, so I see her a lot. But they were leading the center.
I gotta believe that Ann Reynolds, and particularly if you told her I'll be here for a year, she probably chuckled.
She probably did. She's quite wise.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see. We'll know that you're going to get bit by this bug. You've already gotten bit. You took a class at 8 o'clock in the morning. And somehow I have to believe that you impressed her by saying, I love this. I want to see more. I like to eat. I like to cook. I'm looking at how food is made and how you look at your thesis for your master's, and you look at, okay, how am I going to get food from the farm to the table through hospitals and schools? So she had to be impressed. I've known Ann. She's been on the program several times and have tremendous respect for her and her wisdom. She's quite wise lady.
Yeah,
okay.
I share those sentiments. Yeah, we're really lucky to have her here in Wisconsin. So yeah, I'm a graduate of the school of Ann Reynolds, I like to say.
Okay. So grew up in Oregon, went to college at Washington State.
Yep.
Then you got a job at Washington, D.C., and then you decided to go to college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Yep.
Okay, we got it. All right. And you're biking to work today in 32 degrees weather. All right. Okay.
Ann Reynolds was notorious for showing up to work meetings like in a blizzard on her bike. So she beats me there too.
Okay. Well, I have thought about getting my bike out, but okay. And our weather isn't nearly as bad as the weather in Wisconsin.
I know. My in-laws are in D.C., so I get back there quite often. So,
okay, so you've got this job, and you started with development. So what was that like for you to start off at the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperative Development, developing co-ops? What was that like?
I think, to be really frank, it was a steep learning curve. I mean, I'd worked on this one cooperative, the fifth season cooperative, as part of my master's project, and I found that to be one of the hardest things. I actually wrote their business plan, and that project really sort of pitted my idealism about what could be in the world with sort of the cold, hard reality of the economics of farming and our food system. And so I think that was a really valuable lesson for me in co-op development. And when you're supporting a group, because you yourself as a co-op developer are rarely actually developing the co-op, at least that's not how we do most of our work here. It's more responding to groups that are interested in starting co-ops. And so how do you guide groups in a way that sort of keeps their feet on the ground, but still their eyes on the horizon, and not be a dream killer? Because a lot of people come to cooperatives with a lot of sort of like wanting to create a cooperative that would succeed in the world they wish existed. I think cooperatives are inherently optimistic endeavors, this notion that we can overcome challenges or meet some common need if we work together. And so as a developer who's supposed to be grounded in, business best practices and understanding the market and making sure that the business side is sound, as well as sort of the democratic association side of a cooperative, striking that right balance between helping people achieve their collective dream in a way that is going to be sustainable for that business long term. And that can be hard. I've definitely fell in love with a couple of projects, and you just really, really get invested emotionally in them. But it's fun work. It's really, I mentioned earlier that when I was at the World Watch Institute, the research organization, I was really craving more sort of hands-on applied work. And I certainly found that in co-op development. Some of the projects I worked on, one was a grocery store in a town of 700 people, and the grocery store had been family owned for 90 plus years, and the family is trying to exit the grocery store, and they that would have left that very small town that village without a grocery store. And so I was driving out to Plain, Wisconsin every couple of weeks for board meetings and sitting with people in this community and trying to figure out what is it going to take to keep a grocery store on your main street. And that's it's really satisfying work, and it worked. The grocery store stayed. I think it's actually closing this year. It hasn't, but it extended the life of that grocery store for an extra 6 or 7 years in that community, so that the elderly residents who couldn't drive anymore still had access to fresh produce and groceries. So yeah, it's been fun work.
It's kind of sad that it's closing, but I get it.
I know that was kind of a bummer. I mentioned that example, and then I was like, and actually, I think it's closing. But I mean, it's also a good and hard lesson about cooperatives is that if members aren't using them, they exist to serve a member need, and if members don't patronize their co-ops, that's a real challenge because they are businesses. So, yep. But it's good work. I'm not doing it as much of it in my new role, but I still really love it and get to work on a handful of projects now and then. So
I want to go all the way back to your first one that you did in your master's thesis. What was the name of that? I missed it the 2 times you said it.
It's called the Fifth Season Cooperative.
Fifth.
Yep. So it's actually a multi-stakeholder cooperative, which little did I know at the time, I was like cutting my co-op development teeth on one of the most sort of like complex models that I have worked on since. So the cooperative, it really emerged from this conversation that was happening in Vernon County and surrounding counties. And Vernon County has a huge number of cooperatives per capita, a huge number of organic farms per capita. I think the county might have the highest number of organic farms per capita of any county in the country. So it's not surprising that conversation emerged there. And so there were farmers who wanted access to these institutional markets, and there were institutions, namely a hospital system and a couple of schools that really wanted access to local produce, but they just didn't, quite know how to make that connection, didn't have time to actually interface with, 50 different farmers. So the conversation began with all of these different stakeholders at the table. So there were buyers, and there were farmers, and there were farmer groups like Organic Valley, which is also a cooperative, and there were processors like a meat processor and a dairy, a cheese cooperative. And so they all started at the table, and as the conversation evolved, it really made sense to continue to include all of those stakeholders, and that if this really difficult challenge of connecting institutions and local institutions and farmers
Courtney,
was going to be...
I'm sorry, we have to take our first break.
Okay.
Take a quick here. We'll come back, and I want to talk to you about conversions and existing co-ops and cooperative startups, and in particular this multi-stakeholder. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that down. Information is power. This is why WL makes a great, great partner, because the National Co-op Bank and our group decided we wanted to give you information about co-ops. It's not the information that's power. It's when you take that information and put it to use. When you take that information and you strike the match of action. That action is where you get the power from. And so we have Courtney on the line with us today. Courtney Berner is Executive Director of the Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives, and she's been talking about putting action in her master's thesis in the Fifth Service Cooperative, and we're going to talk about the other action that the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperative does. So you want to finish talking about you're talking about the multi-stakeholders?
Yeah, you can tell I get excited. I'm just like, right, I could talk right through your commercial break.
Okay.
So I'll wrap that up. They decided to keep all those stakeholders at the table in order to be able to have everyone at the same table to, have some of those difficult conversations that were necessary to advance their goals of connecting farmers and institutions. So I think there's six or seven membership classes, producers, processors, producer groups, buyers, workers, community supporters. So they really included everyone in the co-op as an actual voting member, which, has certainly been challenging and makes it more complex, but I think has also enabled the group to get over some hurdles over the years that they wouldn't have been able to if they hadn't had all those different stakeholders at the table.
So very challenging.
That one's still around.
And I assume very rewarding. And
it was.
That you get this fresh farm, fresh produce to the institutions, going through processing and everything that one has to do to get that food there. So it sounds like it's great. It works.
Yeah. Yep. It was a fun project and a challenging one to again cut my teeth on. So.
Okay, so you talked about existing co-ops. So you support existing cooperatives that are already in Wisconsin and maybe in the nation and perhaps in the world. What kinds of things do you do to support existing co-ops?
So we do, like I said, we research, outreach, and education. And so I think we do two large conferences every year. One is our Farmer Cooperative Conference. The 23rd Annual Farmer Cooperatives Conference will be in 2020. Ann Reynolds actually helped start that conference when she was here at the center. And that's a conference for people who are connected to farmer cooperatives from around the country and, look at a range of issues from trade policy to governance best practices. We usually bring in a guest from an international cooperative to lend sort of that international perspective on how things are done at their cooperative. And then we also organize CCMA, which is the largest national gathering of grocery cooperatives in the country. And we've actually been organizing that since 2017. It's been around for, I think, over 60 years. And Ann Hoyt, who you might have interviewed at some point, when she retired, the conference sort of left and went to NCBA for a couple years and then came back to us, and they asked us to take it over in 2017. And so, those are two really, I feel like those two conferences are illustrative of sort of the diversity of our audience as a center that works with all types of co-ops. So you have, natural foods, grocery cooperatives, and you have sort of agribusiness cooperatives. And we're, striving to develop content and create events and conferences that are really valuable to those very different audiences. So we also do some board training. We have a director training program here in Wisconsin. We do 2 forums a year and some other sort of events. And then on the research side, like I said, we work with all types of cooperatives. And so that's in many ways one of the things that sets us apart, but it's also one of our biggest challenges. So this tension that we face as an organization is how do we provide value to such a diverse audience? It's probably a similar challenge to what I imagine NCBA faces. So it's fun in that we get to work with a diverse audience and make connections between sectors, but it's also hard. And so we really look for research questions that span a variety of sectors. So our center is probably one of the things we're probably best known for nationally is a map that we released in 2009 of U.S. cooperatives based on a census that we completed, I believe, in 2006. And sort of ever since then, our faculty director has been on a quest to measure the U.S. cooperative economy using existing data. And he was part of a team that worked on getting the co-op question added to the most recent economic census. And then right now I'm working on actually raising some funds to launch a national longitudinal survey on cooperative governance. So there's no data collected right now across cooperatives on what's happening in the boardroom, the relationship between the board and the manager, and sort of we're hoping to raise some money to be able to actually collect data on that and then share that data back with the cooperative community so we can, be benchmarking our governance practices within the cooperative sector and then, outside of the cooperative sector as well.
So You are right. You love this and you get excited and you go. Now I'm going to try to break some of it down. So this board and management and raising money to do this study. How I got involved with co-ops, Courtney, is I started managing them. I knew nothing about it in my formal education and a couple master's degrees. So I started managing housing co-ops, and I have it as a manager of housing co-ops. That's what is most important for success of a housing co-op is good governance. That board and setting policies and hiring a manager and then holding that management accountable is extremely important. If you don't have it, I find that it's very, very difficult to have a successful housing co-op, and I'd say it's the same thing throughout. So that sort of tension and dynamic is extremely important to the success of a co-op, is what I have found. So I'd be quite interested in this longitudinal governance piece that you're talking about. How much money are you trying to raise? What do you need?
Well, I'm actually writing a little proposal right now. I've a couple $100,000, between $100,000 and $200,000 to really get it off the ground. It would be survey based and possibly some interviews, and then I'll need to raise money sort of in an ongoing basis to continue the study. So our thinking right now is that we would do a survey every 2 years. That thinking could change as we sort of get into the project. But I think a couple $100,000 to get for that first 2 years to really establish the foundation. I think when you're doing a longitudinal study, that first year is really important and asking the right questions and getting your list right. And so part of that process will also be continuing to engage leaders from the co-op community in the conversation about what data can we collect that's valuable to you. I've certainly already engaged in a lot of those conversations, sort of preliminary conversations to get buy-in on the project. That was my first step, was talking to Doug at NCBA and talking to TE at National Cooperative Grocers and other sort of apex organizations within the co-op community, and saying, would this data be valuable to you? Because if it's not, this is going to be a hard project, and if it's not going to be valuable to you, I don't want to do it. I have plenty of other things to do. But, everyone I talked to said, yeah, I'm interested. I think this could really be valuable to our members, to our cooperatives, and to us as we work with cooperatives. So we'll see. Stay tuned.
So if my hypothesis is right, I think that getting boards to understand the power they have in terms of whether or not this co-op is going to be successful or not. And so it's a volunteer position. And so therefore, at least in credit unions and housing co-ops, I assume farm co-ops and the rest of them are volunteer positions. So, but it really has to be extremely important to somebody if you take that job. If you run for the board, you have to really know that the association, the business, is really dependent on what kind of good decisions you make. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually one of the questions we're interested in exploring is board compensation, because there are certain sectors where you're correct. It's all volunteer. There's no compensation. And there are other sectors where directors are compensated, and in some cases compensated quite a lot. And so even understanding the differences, within electric co-ops or within farmer co-ops, and then the differences between compensation in, say, electric co-ops and credit unions or grocery cooperatives. So that's actually one of the things we're interested in exploring, because there is some diversity of practice there.
I would like to know that one, too. I didn't even know about the ones that are compensated. So real quickly, we've talked about several co-ops. I'm going to talk about the different types of co-ops before we take our next break. Okay. So there are basically 4 types of co-ops, and you can tell me if I've got it right or not. So
all right.
I have, and it depends on who owns and controls that business. So if it's owned and controlled by the employees, it's called a worker co-op, and therefore that could be any business you could think of if it's owned and controlled by the employees. So yep. That's one group. And then the second group, if the business is owned and controlled by the people that uses the products or services, is called a consumer co-op. And then you have housing co-ops, credit union, a lot of food co-ops. Food co-ops could either be a worker co-op or a consumer co-op, or both. So you have all of these different REI. There's a health clinic in Madison that's owned by the patients.
Group Health Cooperative. Yep, I'm a member.
Okay. And then, so the third one is a purchasing co-op. If the co-op who starts a business to help buy the kinds of things they need. And farmers have done that a lot. Artists do it. There's a group in D.C. called Consumer Purchasing Alliance, and they were formed for churches and nonprofits and so forth. That's called a purchasing co-op. And the fourth one is what I call marketing co-ops. Sometimes they're called producer co-ops, and those like Cabot Creamery, Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray. There's a artist group in Pittsburgh called Ujamaa, which black ladies have gotten together to do their art and have a store. And that's called marketing co-ops, and we'll be right back after the next to talk about the different kinds of things you're doing. Particularly, I want to get to conversions. We'll be right back.
Great.
Your news talk station.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and we have Miss Courtney Berner, who is the Executive Director of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. And she has a lot of energy. She's enthusiastic, and she likes to talk about co-ops, which is one of my favorite subjects. And we've talked about the existing co-ops and the kinds of work that you do and research and assisting co-ops in different kinds of ways. So before we get to conversions, I want to talk cooperative development, because you said something that you don't go out and say, oh, we need a co-op in blah section, and so we're going to develop one. You wait till people come to you and say, we want to start a co-op in blah, any of those 4 areas that we just talked about, and then you help them. Is that kind of what the way you do development?
Yeah, I think you can kind of, this is, like any generalization, a little dangerous, but you can kind of break co-op development into two different categories. There's sort of incubated cooperative development and more grassroots co-op development. So, I would put our work in the more grassroots. So a group of people comes together with an idea, and then they find us and reach out to us and say, hey, we're interested in exploring the co-op model or starting a hemp co-op or a childcare co-op. Can you help us? And that's generally our approach. There are groups out there that incubate cooperatives. So Prospera out in Oakland, California, is a great example of a nonprofit that starts cooperatives for Latina immigrants and helps them establish worker-owned cooperatives. And so, and they incubate those cooperatives, and there's a whole process of what they sort of do the business planning, and their process has evolved over time. But then they, recruit people to be part of that business and involve them in some of the development. But it's a really different approach. And both are interesting and good approaches, but we tend to fall into that more grassroots, responding to requests from, and part of that's our capacity and part of it's, our sort of being within the university. So, yep.
So what was the name of that group in Oakland? I want to look them up.
Oh my gosh. Prospera. Prospera. Yep. And there are others. There's one in New York City, the Center for Family Life or Center for Family Living. They have helped start sort of incubate cooperatives in New York. And so, yeah, there are different groups out there that have, and they tend to have, a certain group that they're, certain demographic that they're working with, or a certain type of cooperative that they, maybe a sector that they're working in. Prospera really focused on green cleaning cooperatives initially. They've branched out of just that type of cooperative, but so it took more of like a sector approach.
So I guess the group in Oakland probably work with the the California Center for Cooperative Development, CCCD. Yeah,
I'm not sure how much they work with them, but yeah. I'm sure they're connected up.
So I always want to give a shout out to Kim Kuntz.
Kim Kuntz, yep.
Great work out there. Okay, so that's your cooperative development. So how do you work with the conversions, they talk about all of these baby boomers, which is my age group, who have businesses. I think 75% of them do not have a succession plan, and those businesses may close up or be bought out by a larger corporate, and these workers in this particular community may lose their job, and this community may lose a business and all of that income and taxes and so forth. So how do you help with this conversion?
Yeah, so we've been working on conversions for the last, 5 years probably. We're one of the founding members of Workers to Owners, which is a coalition or sort of collaboration of groups around the country that are interested in advancing employee ownership as a business succession strategy. And so we've provided assistance to a handful of conversions, some of which have actually converted and some of which have stalled out and not converted, which is, that's part of the process. One of our probably most successful projects was Northwind Solar, which is a solar design and installation firm in central Wisconsin that actually was owned by, had 4 owners in an LLC. They all wanted to stay within the business, but they wanted to convert it to a cooperative, both for the longevity of the business and because they were attracted to the worker co-op model. And so they have actually seen tremendous success since the conversion. They've grown their business, they've grown their membership. They're now expanding and building sort of their forever home. But a lot of our work has really been in pipeline development, getting the word out there. So connecting with small business development centers, connecting with economic development professionals, just so that, with accountants and attorneys, just so that the people that are out there talking to business owners and having conversations about what's next, that they may be, planting a seed that selling to their employees as a cooperative might be an option. So we've done several events targeted to economic development professionals and business owners. And we're actually just right now about to release our schedule. We're doing a roadshow in Wisconsin and Minnesota with a couple of partners. We're partnering with University of Minnesota Extension and then Cooperative Development Services in Minnesota and Wisconsin to do a roadshow in rural communities along the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. And we're doing 8 stops in 1 week and just doing these 90-minute sessions on, the sort of opportunity to use employee ownership, particularly worker cooperatives, as a business succession and retention strategy. So we continue to try to spread the word and then, do our best to support the projects that come through the door and connect them with other technical assistance providers when necessary. But it's important work.
8 shows in 5 days?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's we're hitting the road. We figure we might as well make the most of our miles. So.
Okay, so that would be the conversion side of it, and that seems to have a lot of potential for co-op development, particularly worker cooperative. Now, are you working with the Federation, U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops? Is that an organization in doing this?
So we're certainly connected with them. We're not working with them on this project. We have been part of the Workers to Owners collaboration, the Democracy at Work Institute, which has, sort of the sister organization of the Federation, so Melissa Hoover's organization. We've certainly worked with them on some of the early strategizing around what is it going to take to actually reach scale in terms of conversions. And what are some best practices in supporting those conversions? So, there's a really great group of organizations that's emerged. We work with ICA Group in the Northeast. We've worked with Project Equity, which is also out in California, with DAWI. There are many, many others that are doing really excellent work around the country on this and trying to raise the profile of worker co-ops and sort of the promise, both as a business model, but also as a succession strategy.
So you all are doing a lot. It sounds like you really don't like what you do, and you probably have a real problem getting up and riding your bike into work, trying to worry about, what do you have to do and what your boss is going to make you do today. So have I described your work life the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, I have to. I have a 3-year-old who was up sick most of last night. So so there's it's not all roses and rainbows. So but no, I feel really fortunate to have found cooperatives and to have landed in this place professionally. I think in this sort of very divisive political time when things feel very polarized. Cooperatives are a big tent, and I get to interact. They give me a language and a reason to interact with people from across the political spectrum. And I think that's really one of the powers of cooperatives, is that, it's a model that anyone can use, and it's a model that can bring people together, sort of irrespective of there may be, ideological differences in other areas. So yeah, I feel really lucky. I'm not going to lie. There are days that I, like anyone, don't want to come to work, but I feel pretty fortunate and we have a great team here too, which makes the work fun.
Okay. So let me just ask you, do you like what you do?
Yes.
Okay. Said a lot of words. And we've been on this show a little over 6 years now. And I ask that question most interviews, and I've never had any say, oh, no, I don't like what I do. Oh, I just put up with it. It's quite rewarding. And why do you like it then? What makes it rewarding, this sort of career in this cooperative world?
I think, what I just mentioned is this big tent and this ability to work across different groups of people and really see the power that the cooperative model has in different people's lives, whether you're a home care worker that's, seeking better wages and better working conditions, or a farmer that needs, better prices for your milk. I don't get bored. We do a lot. And so there's a diverse range of things to be interested in. I also think, one of the things I really noticed when I took the cooperatives class and started going to conferences, that as a younger person, I was really welcomed into the cooperative community. It really feels like a community. And so now when I go to like the Co-op Impact Conference in DC, it's sort of like a little family reunion. And that just there's a spirit of cooperation. There's certainly some competition out there too, but there's really a spirit of cooperation in this community, and it feels like a meaningful movement to be a part of. But it's also really I'm a super pragmatic person, and so it also feels grounded. It's a model that's tested. It's not pie in the sky. It's something that the evidence of the power of cooperatives is all around us, and so it feels visionary and exciting, and also really grounded. So yeah.
So I get that you really like what you do. It's not boring. You wake up in the morning, you have challenges, and what I really heard is that you are helping people, whether it's everyday people trying to get a job and raise their families and have enough income to do that, or whether it's businesses like farmers or other businesses that you can really help them. In farming, is minimize the risk and get a better return. So
exactly.
You can see the fruits of your labor in helping people in the world. Okay.
Yep.
That is wonderful. And you basically talked about, without saying them, the cooperative principles, values and principles, and volunteer and open membership, which means it's open for everybody and anybody. It doesn't make any difference about your religion or your race or your politics or anything else. Gender, it just doesn't matter. Democratic member control, one member, one vote. The third one is member economic participation. You can put some money in, and if there's a profit, you can get some money out. And you have the chance to say, because of the fourth principle, autonomy and independence, you say what happens to that profit, how much of it goes into the members' pockets, and how much goes in the community, and how much stays in the business. And then there's education, training, and information, and that's a big piece of what you all do. It's the fifth principle of cooperatives. And there's cooperation among cooperatives, and this is what this family environment that you talked about, which I love. And there's less competition here than I found when I would go to capitalistic type conferences. You sort of hold on to what you have. And then there's a concern for the community. Which is a huge part of it. And that's why sometimes people would put like 1/3 of their profits back into the community and solving community problems. And I really like the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others, or caring for one another. And I really wish that was in Washington and every state capital.
Amen.
Okay. Honesty and openness by itself would be wonderful. Let alone caring for each other, which is why I think there ought to be politicians. But anyway, we're going to go to our final break.
Okay.
And when we come back, if you could just think about over the break and come back and tell us some more examples of companies you've worked with to do conversions or do startup, or people you've helped in your training and so forth, some real live examples in our final piece. I'd really appreciate it.
Great.
Okay. We'll be right back. Information is power, and the National Cooperative Bank has been sponsoring this program since we got started. And we were only going to do it 1 month, Courtney. We were only going to do it 1 month, the month of October, 6.5 years ago almost now. And the National Co-op Bank has been with us, and their mission is to provide financial services to co-ops and their members, particularly in low-income communities. And I find that it got started in the 80s. And Chuck Snyder and group do a wonderful job. And matter of fact, on this show, some people call them angels to work to help people. Okay. I think there was Roberta McDonald from Cabot Creamery that said that. So let's talk about some examples of different kinds of businesses you've helped to start up or develop and convert.
Sure. So one of the projects that we've been fortunate to be involved with is the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition. So you might have heard that after New York's big announcement about funding worker co-op development, our mayor, who's no longer our mayor, but Paul Soglin, said, "Wait a second, Madison's worker co-op central. We don't want to be outdone by New York City." So he made a very ambitious commitment of, I think, $5 million over 5 years or something.
I think it was $1 million a year for 5 years.
Yep, $1 million a year for 5 years. Yep. So he, which then ended up, once it had moved through the process, ended up being $600,000 per year for 5 years to support the development of worker cooperatives in the city of Madison, with a particular emphasis on communities of color, low-income communities that maybe had been traditionally kept out of the workforce. And so our center, Ann Reynolds in particular, was really involved with getting that set up, and I've been involved as well. And so we're part of that Madison Co-op Development Coalition, and actually the co-op development specialist who helps start co-ops is housed here at the center, Charity Schmidt. So we've been able, that's been a really, most of our co-op development funding was really for rural communities. So this is, I think, the first time we had funding to do co-op development in an urban environment explicitly. And so one of the cooperatives that has emerged from that project is called Soaring Independent, which is a Black woman-owned home care cooperative here in Madison that's really striving to create living wage, dignified jobs in the home care industry here in Madison. And so that's been a really, really satisfying project, meeting the need for jobs and also meeting the need for home care services, which I imagine you've had someone on the show talking about home care. It's a pretty hot topic in the co-op space right now. So that's one project that's emerged. We've also been supporting a project called Roots for Change, which is sort of Latina immigrant community health cooperative. So many of them are becoming doulas and providing community health services within their community to improve maternal outcomes. So that's been another really satisfying project to work on. We've been connected with them for a couple of years. I think the MCDC, the Madison, that municipal funding has been really a game changer for our ability to deliver more technical assistance and to be a little more proactive about drumming up the word about worker co-ops here in Madison and doing some programming on bringing people who might be interested in starting a business but don't know about co-ops into the co-op fold.
So I think, is the up-and-coming conference going to be in Madison this year?
It is. I'm actually meeting with Deb Troca this afternoon. She's in Madison right now. So I will see her at 3 p.m. So yep, this will be the first year in Madison.
Well, tell Deb I said hello, and I'm planning to be there at the up-and-coming.
Oh, good. Well, I'll see you there.
And I think the tour is on March the 5th, and the conference ends on the 6th and the 7th.
I believe so.
And this is up and coming food co-ops. Mm-hmm. And I've had the folks from Flint, Michigan that are starting a food co-op, and Detroit on the show at different times. And so I met a lot of people. I went last year, and looking forward to going again.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I'll be there. No, it's a fun conference. There's a lot of energy in the grocery co-op startup community.
And they're doing tours on the 5th, and we will do our show live from Madison. And I'm wanting to get to your health clinic. I really want to see that. So
to GHC?
Yes.
Yes. Well, let me know. Their CEO is on our advisory committee, so happy to connect you up with him.
Okay. Ann Reynolds, we had her on talking about that, and I'm very excited about that particular consumer co-op. The patients own it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the up and coming. So that's the kinds of things you're doing for. So let's talk about conversion. So give me some examples of conversion.
Some examples of conversion. So I mentioned the Northwind solar. So we're working on a couple projects right now, and I think this is a testament to, and I can't name them because they're still in the process, but a testament to the sort of the broad application of the worker co-op model. So one of the projects we're working on is a small manufacturing firm way up in northern Wisconsin. We're about to drive there next week. The owner is looking to exit, and there's a small group of and it's a subset of a larger manufacturing company, and they're going to take part of it. I think there's about 7 or 8 of them. So they're working on that. So rural manufacturing. And then we're also working with a project.
Before you pass the manufacturing piece, I've gone to the Cincinnati Union Cooperative Initiative, I think 3 out of the last 4 times they've had it. And I really got engrossed in this manufacturing, the number of different manufacturing companies that are in the U.S. And how many of them are owned by silver folks, silver-haired people. And a lot of them will go just close doors. And so this seems to be a great model to help the family of the person that owns it to get money, help the employees to keep their jobs, and help the community keep those jobs in that community, which will bring or keep the tax base in the community. So it seems to be win, 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 win all the way around. And I never thought about manufacturing, like manufacturing candy as a manufacturing, because I always think about Detroit and cars.
Cars, yeah.
There's so many different manufacturing companies out there, and I did know the number. It's a huge number, and a huge number of manufacturing jobs that go unfilled every year. So that would be great. And there's people, I know there's a group in Chicago that's been working on that. Okay. So, that's one you're working on. Great.
Well, and even food manufacturing. I mean, in the upper, in Wisconsin with all of our dairy and agriculture, even food processing is really a type of manufacturing. And we've seen some conversions, Real Pickles out east is a conversion that took place in that sort of food manufacturing space. So, yeah, there's a lot of potential. The urban conversion that we're working on right now is an ad agency. So very different from light manufacturing. But, it's, again, a small independent ad agency that works with a lot of nonprofits and sort of values-based businesses. And the owner is looking to exit. And so we're trying to support that team, those staff in buying the business. And one that we completed several years ago was 4-Star Video Heaven, which is a well-known video store in Madison, Wisconsin. I think Dan Savage, if you know Dan Savage, used to work there a lot before he had his advice column and other things. And so we actually were approached by the employees. They said, the woman who owns us, she wants to exit. She's talking about just liquidating our inventory, help us. How do we buy it? And so sometimes you get approached not by the business owner, but by the employees. So that's another sort of venue for ending, for supporting a conversion. And that kept that business around. I think it's still on State Street. It might have moved recently, but yeah. So those are just some examples, a little video store, manufacturing, ad agency. We're looking at opportunities for home care cooperative conversions potentially, but we haven't worked on any yet. So
the whole range of employee worker co-ops could be anything. Have you worked with Rock USA at all in converting what I used to call trailer parks, now mobile home parks, that the people in that park can buy their land, converted from a individual owning it to the people there owning it? in a co-op?
We have not supported any rock deals, but there's an organization in Minnesota that has done a couple of manufactured housing development conversions here in Wisconsin, and we're definitely familiar with the work. Know Paul Bradley's work, but we haven't. We're not doing any of those. We're not a rock affiliate. So.
Well, rock on, Courtney. We got a minute or so left for you to tell us what would you like to leave people with? What's the message?
Well, I think one of the exciting things that I'm doing in my new role is teaching. I actually get to teach the class now that I took, 10 years ago, which is really satisfying because it so clearly altered the course of my profession, my work. And so young people are really interested. I consider myself young. People are really interested in the co-op model, and they're really interested in alternative ways of organizing business, and they may not always associate co-ops with that. And so one of the exciting things that I get to do is teach a class here at UW to undergrads and help them get excited about co-ops. Most of them don't get as excited as I did, but many have said this before, but I think our sort of challenge as a cooperative community is helping people understand the model and helping people get connected to cooperatives and sort of see the power of that model. So we're just trying to do that in a lot of different areas. One of them is an undergraduate class and connecting with other cooperators here in Madison. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show and talk a little bit about our work.
Thank you for being on, and that's a wrap for today. We'll be back next Thursday. Courtney, thank you, and keep up the great work. Everybody out there, live cooperatively, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Your news talk station.